We're going to go ahead and get this meeting started. I'd like to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee. Public comment is welcome. Anyone wishing to speak on any item on the Standing Committee agenda may do so when that item is up for discussion. You'll have 5 minutes to make your comments at that time. If you do wish to speak, we ask that you please get my attention. You'll be recognized and you can go to the podium over there where you can speak. And for accurate recording and broadcasting purposes, we ask that everyone speak directly into a microphone if at all possible. Just again, for everybody's benefit here, we do have a blue sheet. There is a 6th item on our agenda tonight, just to make sure everybody got that. Wonderful, we did. So the first thing is roll call.
Roll call. Albee?
Here.
Walters?
Here.
Murguia? Townsend?
Here.
McTiernan?
Here. Next item of business is approval of the Standing Committee minutes from February 3rd of 2014.
So moved. Second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve the Standing Committee minutes from February 3rd, 2014 as submitted. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes have it. Those minutes are approved. The first item on our committee agenda is a funding request for the Downtown YMCA brought forward by Gordon Criswell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Standing Committee. What we have before you this evening is we're asking for authorization to extend our current YMCA contract at the 8th Street Y downtown for another year in the amount of $75,000. Because it's $75,000, we have to get your authorization to expend these funds from the park fund dollars.
And so the idea behind this is that this would just continue our short-term stabilization until such time as we have a more complete plan for the healthy campus, the community center.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Moving forward.
Yes.
Any questions or discussion of this issue? Yes, sir.
Since the announcement of why was going to close the downtown facility and the commitment of the UG to fund for stabilization, has there been any increase in usage at the facility?
My understanding is that membership now is around 635, 640 members. Prior to the UG stabilizing the facility there, membership was down. Additionally, the YMCA has hired a on-site maintenance person that has done, in my opinion, as a user, an outstanding job of fixing the things that the members request and need. And so there's been a markedly improved outlook of the facility itself. Things that are broken are getting repaired in a timely manner, and we continue to work with the staff at the Y. In our current contract, we have a capital fund, and so any monies that the Y uses for repairs, we have to jointly approve those before they're actually expended. So last report I saw, membership was at about 640 members.
And did I hear that the membership had dipped as low as in the 200s at the time of their announcement?
Is that true, Jenny?
Yes, our numbers were at 5-something in February before they made their announcement, but in April when they made their announcement, it went down to 200-ish, so it's up to 640 now.
Okay.
I would also note, you can clarify where it's at. I believe this contract extension goes at a rate that's about half on a monthly rate as to what we were paying in the previous year.
That's correct.
Question. So specifically what you're asking for is a transfer of $75,000 from a contingency within the park fund to this particular line item? Do I understand that correctly?
I'll address that. What we have, this is the casino money that is dedicated for park usage. This is what we used last year. There's $100,000 that goes to it. That's what we used to get through this point. So we're asking last year when we built our budget, we did not we did not specify in the budget where this money would be expended for the 2014 budget. So it's $100,000 that's budgeted, unallocated. And we're requesting to use $75,000 from that amount of money for the next year of this contract.
Thank you.
I have a question as well. I was happy to read that the amount being requested is approximately half per month. What is the reduction attributed to?
I can, the YMCA requested the full amount. They requested the 150,000, but we negotiated down to an offer of 75,000.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion. The request is to approve this transfer and move it forward to the full commission for final approval.
So moved.
Second?
There's a motion and a second to authorize use of current budgeted dollars to cover the requested contract with the YMCA. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Roll call, Alden,
Aye.
Walters,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McTiernan.
Aye. Thank you to both of you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Our next item, item number 2, is a resolution that would contemplate a $13 million loan from KDHE for BPU improvements. I see Marlon Goff is here, and members of the BPU are here. All of a sudden, I thought Marlon was taking it all by himself. No, absolutely. Have a seat right there, and just make sure that whoever is talking gets close to a microphone so that... There you go. Oh, it's a little small.
Good evening.
You see it.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight. We are before you this evening to request $13 million in Kansas Public Water Supply Loan funding. It's for 2 projects or main topic areas. $3 million is for Nimrin Water Treatment Plant improvements, and $10 million is for main replacement projects. That $10 million will be spent over the next 3 to 4 years. The Public Water Supply Loan Fund, it's a revolving loan program with the state of Kansas. The interest rate's not set until the loan is approved, but it's currently, we're estimating around 2.79%. So it's below market rates on the fund. The Nimrin Water Treatment Plant improvements, approximately $3 million. When we did our 2005 master plan, it was by Black and Veatch and Burns McDonnell. They recommended a filter addition to our Nimrin treatment plant. We revisited that master plan, and our water demand projections have not been as high as they anticipated in 2005. But we are running close. We did have a very hot summer 2 years ago, and our max day was about 50 million gallons per day on a couple of occasions that year, and our capacity is 54, so that doesn't leave us with a lot of wiggle room. But at the same time, we did not want to spend $18 million for an 18 MGD plant expansion. It just didn't make sense. The demands weren't there. So What we've done is some pilot testing on our filters, our existing filters, to see if we can push more water through them and still meet all safe drinking water requirements. The pilot results look very promising. We are meeting to go over them this week and seek approval from KDHE to either push more water through or do some filter media improvements, both of which are very low-cost options as compared to a brick-and-mortar expansion, which would, again, have cost $18 million. Also in that $3 million is a replacement of a high-service pump and a backwash pump. The remaining $10 million, as you know, we have a lot of old distribution mains. I think it makes the headlines in many cities across the country. We have over 1,000 miles of pipe, and some of our older mains are 4-inch and smaller, and that's where we experience, and this may be where you want to take the map around, first showing the 4-inch mains and smaller that we have. We have approximately 237 miles of 4-inch and smaller mains, and we average about 600 main leaks a year, 80% of which are on these mains.
Blue is 2-inch and the pink is 1-inch. So we've got over 180 miles.
The $10 million will cover approximately 19 miles worth of replacement. If all of it's spent on replacing 4-inch and smaller mains, that represents about 8% of replacement of our 4-inch and smaller mains. And some of them may go to replacing some larger mains, but we want to concentrate on the 4-inch and smaller. We also, when picking locations to replace our mains, we of course look at our data on how many main leaks have been on the main, how old it is, but we also work very closely with the Unified Government mill and overlay projects. And our thought there is, you know, if the Unified Government's going in and improving a street, we want to work with them, work with the Unified Government, get in front of them. So if we see a mill and overlay project where we think we should replace a main, we want to do it before they improve the street. Or in some cases, it's just going in and inspecting valves and hydrants. But a lot of cases, we'll say, okay, they're going to go mill overlay the street. We've got a main there that's old. It's got a lot of main leaks. Let's get in there and replace it. So that's what these dollars will be used for over the next 4 years. On page 2 of your handout, excuse me, is there any questions before I leave this, the summary?
Will you be replacing those small mains with the same size mains, or are you going to be upsizing them?
A lot of times we will upsize them, and I'm about ready to get into some examples of what we've done over the last 5 years. A lot of times they have been increased in size. There will be some occasions where we'll stay with a smaller size, but we'll also make sure that there's fire protection within 500 feet of the project. Thank you for your question. Thank you.
I may have some questions, but I'd like to hear the rest of the presentation.
Okay.
It might be answered.
Okay, thank you. If you go to page 2, this is a summary of improvement projects that we've done in conjunction with the Unified Government's annual mill and overlay program. And you'll see the various locations on the map up there, and Chris can take it around if you'd like to see it a little bit closer. The red dots represent work completed in conjunction with Unified Government mill and overlay projects over the last 5 years. And if you look at the right-hand column in the size and comments, you'll see a lot of installed 6-inch main. So, yes, in answer to your previous questions, a lot of times we do improve that with a 6-inch main versus a 1.5 or 2 or 4. Gives you an idea of the amount of money we've spent. We made a decision a couple years back to ramp up with the full support of our board to try to start getting ahead of the aging infrastructure in our system. So you'll see the dollars amount spent really started increasing in about 2011, and we're trying to get that up to about an amount of $2 million a year, and that's what the loan funds will be used for. If you look on the third page there, right-hand column, you'll see that a lot of main replacement work occurred in conjunction with the mill and overlay. And then on your final page are the anticipated projects in 2014, and they are represented with the green dots on the map. These are locations where there's going to be mill and overlay work, and we're going to go in and do some main replacement work. Again, that's what the intended use is for the Public Water Supply Loan Fund dollars. So with that, I'd like to entertain questions. I also have Lori Austin with us, who's worked closely with Kathy Peters, helping us obtain this loan. Also, the amount of dollars spent has been put into our cost of service study, and we do not anticipate a rate increase for 2014 or 2015 in conjunction with this project.
Fantastic. I will say thank you. I know the mayor is very concerned that we coordinate the water work with mill and overlay so that we only cut a street once and not multiple times. So thank you for working closely with our crews in getting that done, because I understand that the integration has been very good. So that's a plus. Let me just make sure I'm clear on this. These bonds will be issued by the UG but backed by the BPU. Is that correct?
That's, Mr. Chairman, that's what I'm ready to address. I'm Kathy Peters. I'm with the law firm Cutek Rock, and Jody Bodine brings me in periodically to assist Unified Government and BPU with certain matters, including this water loan. This is treated as a financing of the Unified Government for the benefit of the BPU, as you suggest. It's actually not a bond issue. It's a loan that KDHE is making directly to the Unified Government for the benefit of the Board of Public Utilities. And it is payable solely from revenues of the water system and the electric system. Under Kansas law, KDHE, when it makes one of these loans that doesn't have any general obligation backing, will require that bond insurance be obtained to insure the loan. And since this is payable solely from revenues, it is an obligation that will be insured by Assured Guarantee, which has insured the last few BPU loans that the Unified Government has gotten as well. One other thing I wanted to mention in connection with that, you will see a reference in the resolution to an alternative source of financing would be utility system revenue bonds. That was added at the suggestion of your bond counsel, just so if in the future you could have less than 2.78% total interest cost, if there was some benefit to refund this loan as a part of a BPU water bond issue, that you could then refund it with revenue bonds. And you can't do that unless you follow certain procedures under the statute to have the issuer approve the improvements and publish notice of the intent to make the improvements. So there will be notice published, but that notice says they may be issued as bonds, and that's solely for a refinancing. This is going to be a water loan at this time from KDHE. The only other thing I wanted to address was the process. The process that KDHE requires is first there's an application and approval of a project. When that project has been given conditional approval from KDHE, the borrower has to have a public hearing and give people the opportunity to comment on those improvements. The BPU has held that hearing. We had a 30-day notice requirement. That hearing was held, and then the BPU is able to complete Part 2 of the application to go forward with KDHE, and also to begin working more closely with Assured Guarantee to get that insurance in place. Now we're ready for the approvals of the loan itself, and so the unified government, as the entity that owns the BPU, is being asked to approve a resolution authorizing the loan. After unified government approval, it'll go back to the BPU board when we have the actual loan agreement from KDHE. So that's the process that we're looking at. And again, I will entertain any questions. I know Lori's going to talk a little bit about the actual financing of it and how it fits in with the BPU budget.
Just repeat a little bit what Jim said, that we did. We did do a cost of service. BPU has undergone a cost of service for the water side. It's a 5-year plan, and we looked out for 2 years to determine if there was any rate impact. And as Jim stated, there is no need for any type of rate adjustment in order to go forward with this loan.
And I also want to mention that the repayment of this is in the BPU's budget, so this is already a budgeted item for them.
Any comments or questions?
Yes, I just wanted to point out a couple of things. First of all, this is kind of a long-term plan. The Water Department has tried to become much more aggressive to address kind of the water main needs of the BPU because we want to really capture water that is being lost because of leaks. And we do have an aging infrastructure, and so this is a kind of an approach to become more aggressive with that. We were set back during the drought because when there was a severe drought, a lot of those funds went to just patching because we had an extraordinary number of water main leaks. So this kind of puts us back on track to get ahead of the problem. Secondly, the increased filtration. They've done extensive study to try and determine whether we can use the existing filter system that we have to get more production, and those tests have been run. The state has approved it, so it's a good low-cost approach to meet our needs going out the next 10 years.
Thank you, David. We're in a process of getting approval from the state on the increased loading rates, but the data looks good, so we're extremely hopeful. I might add, if we don't spend $3 million in the water treatment area, we'll take whatever funds that we did not spend there and put it towards water main replacements. Thank you, Dave.
I have one quick question. On the final page of your presentation, you have 2014 final overlay project list. Now, this does not consume the entire $10 million. Is that correct?
That is correct. Only 2014 portion, and I believe we budgeted about $2 million this year.
$2 million is represented on this page?
That is correct.
Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. For the benefit of not only me, but the rest of the viewing audience, what happens if we do not get this loan in terms of the filtration system and the water main work that you talked about?
With respect to the water main work, we do far less replacement of mains. We can only fund so much from cash, and without the $10 million, then we would cut back significantly on our replacement rate of water mains, which would mean we'd also cut back on the amount of mains work that we replaced in conjunction with the mill and overlay project. So that nice new street where we've got an old main that needs to be replaced, if we didn't have the funding for it, we probably wouldn't replace it and potentially could be tearing it up to replace the main leak. As far as filter improvements, again, we were at 50 million gallons per day. 54 is our capacity, and that's not a lot of wiggle room. It really creates a high-stress situation with staff during those periods. It increases our filter backwash rates. It becomes a little more difficult to manage. And again, we feel that spending $1 million, I know the total's 3, but approximately $1 million to $1.5 million to achieve a 5 to 10 million gallons per day in production is money extremely well spent.
Could you explain for me again, what's the difference? You talked about capacity, 50 to 54 million. What does that mean, though?
Well, it means last summer, or 2 summers ago, we had a 50 million gallon per day demand, and the amount we can produce is 54.
Okay.
That's pretty close. I will say it's very efficient. It's very efficient to have a plant as close to your max day supply as possible, but you don't want to get too close because you need to cover a lot of what-if scenarios. A significant main break. This also allows for if large user of water wanted to relocate to Kansas City, Kansas, and we'd have the water supply available for them.
So it will increase our capacity?
That is correct.
Okay, and it would go from 50 to 54 to what?
It'd go to 54 to approximately 60.
To 60, okay. And I know that it'd been mentioned that no increase in BPU customers' rates is expected for 2014, 2015. What about the remainder of the term of the note? It says 20-year, so we're only, do I want to use the word guaranteeing, but only looking out 2 years? To the question I know BPU users are going to ask, what is this going to mean to my bill each month?
Yes, we're looking at no increase in water rates for 2014 and 2015. The cost of service study does indicate an increase will be needed in 2016. And I believe the amount was in the 2 to 3% range in 2016.
What would that mean in terms of dollars to the average BPU bill payer?
If the average bill is $40, 2% of $40 is
Okay.
less than $1.
2%?
Less than $1.
Okay. All right. Okay. With the work done or to be done with the water main rehab, going back to the chart where it showed the diameter, I guess, of some of the existing mains, if they're being replaced 4 inches or smaller to a larger diameter, will that type of work improve water pressure? I know that's a concern in some of the older areas. Will this type of water main rehab have any impact on that?
Yes, obviously a 6-inch main can flow significantly more water than a 1.5, 2, or 4, which does help fire protection as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions? The request before us is to approve the resolution authorizing the BPU to obtain this funding.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the resolution authorizing the BPU to obtain a loan from Kansas Public Water Supply Fund administered by KDHE. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Roll call, Alving,
Aye.
Walters,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank Chris Stewart, Director of Civil Engineering, for doing all the real work with respect to these improvements, and Bob Roddy and staff of the Unified Government for all their cooperation with the mill and overlay projects and the coordination there. And of course, the support of our BPU board. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Item number 3 is a request to approve a resolution authorizing approval of a memorandum of agreement with Kansas City, Missouri and the Mid-America Regional Council as part of the 1KC Bi-State Brownfield Coalition Grant. Now we have Mr. Goff.
excited. It's been a while since I've been down here, so I got ahead of myself. But good evening, everyone. Marlon Goff, Economic Development. So the action item tonight is a resolution to approve that memorandum of agreement, and essentially that resolution established the framework for how the coalition will manage and operate the grant. So just some real quick background on the grant. It's a $600,000 brownfields assessment grant awarded to the coalition last fall from the EPA. And so again, as referenced earlier, this resolution will set the framework or kind of spell out exactly how we manage the grant. 4 strategic areas are designed to allocate the assessment funds for this project. They are projects that are scheduled to improve public infrastructure, urban agriculture projects, projects that will increase access to high-speed internet, and then the 4th category would be workforce development. And with that, I'm open to any questions members of the committee might have.
That's interesting to me. So brownfield
Yes.
does not relate to, let's say, ecological contamination, environmental contamination.
Well, not necessarily. So a brownfield is essentially a piece of property, but the redevelopment or reuse of which could potentially complicate. And so this grant will allow for assessment dollars associated with that phase of the project to kind of spell out exactly what's there, what's been the historic use for this particular property. And then from there, we'd be able to move forward with the project knowing what the risk factors are.
Okay. And that's something that a developer would look and say, I don't want to front the cost to find out what may be wrong with it before I get started on it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this grant would not be tied to any particular piece of property at this time? Because like committee member Mr. Alvey, I was associated with the brownfield grant with some environmental problem, but not necessarily.
Yeah, so, I mean, the term brownfield, it is an environmental term or designation of a property, but, I mean, the funds isn't necessarily tied to a particular piece of property or project. What we find is with most development projects, there's always some component of environmental relevance associated with a project. So this tool will allow for projects submitted to the coalition for consideration to at least have that piece of funding available if needed to speak to what known or unknown issues might be associated with this particular project.
Thank you.
The request before us is to approve the resolution authorizing approval of the memorandum of agreement.
Move for approval.
Second?
There's been a motion and a second to approve the resolution authorizing the approval of a memorandum of agreement with Kansas City, Missouri and Mid-America Regional Council. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Roll call. Alvey.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McTiernan.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Goff. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
I'm going to get one of these for my daughter's room. Because I know there's stuff in there that's not kosher.
Wow, calling her out in public. Way to go.
I hope she's watching. Hi, sweetheart.
All right, item number 4 on our agenda tonight is a request to approve a resolution approving a proposal submitted by Lane 4 Property Group regarding marketing services for the former Indian Springs Mall site. Mr. Brakovich.
Thank you, Commissioners. Good evening. George Brakovich with Economic Development. Members of the development team are making their way to the table as well, and maybe we'll do a quick round of introductions. Go ahead, Hunter.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. Hunter Harris, one of the partners with Lane 4 Property Group.
Tom O'Leary with Lane 4 Property Group.
Corb Maxwell, Polsinelli Law Firm, counsel to the developer.
Corb's probably a very unfamiliar face to this committee.
Never seen you.
Standing meeting here on Monday nights, Corb. What I thought I would do is maybe give a quick synopsis of the history that we've been working with a notice of interest and trying to attract a development partner on the site. So you might recall last year in the summer and fall, we did two notices of interest in an attempt to attract developers to the site. We didn't really define what we expected from the partnership or what we wanted to see from the site. It was more of an open invitation to get the developers' opinions, ideas, concepts for the site. What stood out about Lane 4 to the selection committee on that process was that they were really the only ones that aggressively contemplated a mixed-use idea for the site, which we thought was very relevant to what the community needs and, quite frankly, the community expectations are for the site. And then all that was left to do was iron out a scope of services type agreement. And that's really what we're bringing before you tonight, and the resolution that accompanies that just authorizes the county administrator to execute that. Just a brief comment on the form of the agreement. It's not your typical broker listing service. It's more of an engagement letter to have the development partner be involved in the marketing of the site, and in addition to that, having some cost share associated with the marketing of that site. And you know, then if we're successful in attracting an end user to the site, then we can go into how the developer actually is financially rewarded for that. But until that point, we're working together both on the marketing side as well as the conceptual design. And I think in your packets tonight, you should have had 3 site plans that were submitted. The development team had gone out and secured an architect to do those drawings. I've got those available if we need to expand it. Let me reduce that. And maybe this is a good time to transition over to Hunter or anyone else on the team. They can kind of talk about how they came up with. Oh, that's okay, Commissioner.
Well, I guess the question I have is, so this is owned by the unified government, correct?
Yes.
This property is. So who has development rights on it currently?
Without the agreement, it's our property, and we've tried in the past to be the developer, and I don't know if I mentioned earlier, we still own it, it's not developed, so.
So they have not been assigned to anybody else?
No.
Those rights? No. So.
Well, in the past, yes. Prior to the last notices of interest we did in 2013, we did a previous RFP, and then before that previous RFP, there was an engagement letter with a development firm, but that was not a successful project.
So that agreement is void?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So clean slate?
Clean slate.
And with that, we're very pleased to be a part of the selection process for this truly tremendous site. Right now, I think it's best to say that we're in the visioning stage of the project, and we look forward to a very collaborative effort with the community and the unified government to define their objectives for what they'd like to see here. We were asked to go out and develop some of our own autonomous thought on what we would envision for this project, which is largely a mix of uses, which could be vertically or horizontally integrated on the site. That would include housing, potential senior living development, commercial retail, office, and medical uses. We took a long investigative period with Yeager Architects to develop this conceptual plan, and is contemplated, this is one of thousands of different ways for how this project could come together. As really just a jumping off point, would anticipate somewhere north of 300,000 square feet of retail development and several hundred units of housing. I'd stand for any questions or comments about Lane 4 or our efforts to move this project forward.
So any marketing research on this yet that shows what it will likely end up being?
In our world, really, our connections and our personal relationships with the retailers is the market research. So once retained here in our very conceptual conversations with other retailers, we probe and prod about where they want to be in the market. There isn't a tremendous amount of value, in our opinion, at this point about defining what the demand is for the retail square footage. We feel like we have intrinsically a very good idea of what this site should yield and offer. However, as we move into the housing and other components of the project, we would likely envision a market study as part of the effort to move forward a financing package for the project.
Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. Maybe it's because I'm so familiar with the old Indian Springs as just a purely retail location. So I was intrigued by the possibility of having any type of residential facility on that property in addition to retail. What about the Indian Springs area would indicate it may be suitable for, just as you've listed here, assisted living facilities or any other type of residential use?
That's our opinion at this point, is really just the lack thereof of new construction of both of those types of facilities in this immediate area that we could find. So as often you'll see that new paint, so to speak, will attract new residents. In addition, if we're able to be successful in our efforts to attract the anchor type of users to this project, and with a new vision and life for the Indian Springs mall redevelopment, we could see that being very attractive to new residents to the area that would view this as a live, work, play sort of environment.
Thank you.
So I see this as option one. Are there other options that you're going to present, or?
There are, as I previously mentioned, there are three very conceptual options that we laid out, really just to test the massing and programming on the site. They contemplate really the mix of uses that I've previously described. We view this as really the jumping off point, and would anticipate some active dialogue with the unified government about what really wants to be at this site. This was really the start of our vision.
Well, we certainly have had some great projects in collaboration with Lane 4, but typically you're a developer. But you would propose to leverage your expertise in development here to help with securing a development on this site. And do I understand that we're talking not only about what I think about as Indian Springs, the main mall complex, but we're also talking west of 47th Street, and it also looks like the two properties that are on the northwest and northeast corners of 47th and State.
That's correct. What we encouraged Lane 4 to do is to incorporate all of the property that is currently encompassed within the Indian Springs TIF area. So the only thing that these conceptual plans don't show is an area, the undermined parcels that are just to the south of this location. But they are also part of the TIF. They're just a little bit more long-range planning associated with those, and we wanted to come before you tonight with some conceptual plans that laid out potential total square footage on the retail side, and as Hunter mentioned, the total number of units. You know, one thing too that they've always mentioned to us is the presence of the transit center there, and the ability to both have employees come to the site or folks that live in the area. They can having a place to live in close proximity to that new transit center is a major advantage in terms of getting to other parts of the metropolitan area. And that's certainly something that didn't exist prior to the transit center being there. So, you know, that was a multi-million-dollar investment made. And we were partners on that.
Well, having been a regular visitor to the Indian Springs site when it was the place to be, it certainly would be wonderful to have new development on this site. The request before us tonight is to approve the resolution approving the proposal by Lane 4 regarding marketing services for this property.
And this is to forward this to the whole commission?
This is to forward this to the full commission for final approval before we execute the agreement.
I would move to approve with the suggestion that the full committee may also want to have the benefit of presentation, possibly.
Make a motion to approve with stipulation provided by Commissioner Townsend.
Well, you could consider the
There we go.
Yeah.
Second.
All right, so we effectively have a motion and a second to approve the resolution, approving the proposal submitted by Lane 4, but with the stipulation that we pull this off consent agenda, allowing Lane 4 and Mr. Brakovich to do a presentation to the full commission, excuse me, on the night that this would come forward for final approval. With that stipulated, roll call, please.
Roll call. Alby?
Aye.
Walters?
No.
Townsend?
Aye.
McTiernan?
Aye.
Motion fails.
The motion does fail because, let's see, that is correct. We need 4 votes for the motion to move forward to full commission from standing committee. And so at this point in time, we have our options at this point in time are for Mr. Brakovich and the Lane 4 representatives to bring this proposal, maybe a revised proposal, back to the next meeting of this standing committee where we can reconsider it. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. I would like to hear from Commissioner Walters. I value his opinion, and he may have some insight. I'd just like, if he would, to share his insight as opposed to why this was not particularly attractive to him.
Sure. I'm just not seeing anything on here that convinces me that we should make an exclusive arrangement with Lane 4 based on what I have seen presented tonight.
If I may, maybe I misinterpreted, but it seems to me that this has been a piece of property that has been extremely difficult to develop, and that there is tremendous urgency almost in the community to do something with this, and that engaging Lane 4 is simply a way to jumpstart this, not really knowing, and I understand Commissioner Walters' concern. I see that there's a lot of language, it may also include seeking out potential developers. It may include retailers such as grocery stores. So certainly there's nothing written in stone, but this is, what I understand, engaging Lane 4 to do the groundwork to try and find something that will jumpstart this project.
That's correct. And I think in terms of the conceptual plans that were presented, to not have any labels identifying what those buildings are or could be, it was somewhat purposeful, because in the past, if we had a commitment to seeing one end user and that project wasn't able to come to fruition, then it would seem that the potential project was a failure because we didn't secure the end user. But instead, what we did is we asked Lane 4 to put the plan together this way, and you can kind of look at that, and from a retail standpoint, you know what might be a big box retailer, you know what might look like some junior or inline retailers, and then you can kind of tell where the multifamily components are. And then you've got these other pad sites to the outside, and that's really what we were looking for, is from just a purely conceptual standpoint, how does this mixed-use project look and possibly look on this site? How would you interweave these different project areas?
And Commissioner Walters, if I could speak to your concern also, I think a little bit of what I was hearing from you is partly that you want a little more meat on the bone.
I haven't given up on this site being a landmark development in Kansas City, Kansas. And it almost seems like we've thrown in the towel, and we're going to make it a bunch of suburban pad sites and assisted living facilities. I don't see anything that makes this distinctive and interesting. And, you all have a lot more experience with this than I do, but it is 2014, and we're not trying to develop this in 2009 or 2010. Economic situations are different. I guess I just haven't given up on it.
And Commissioner, if I could speak to that a little bit. One, with the firm you work with better than anybody, all we're doing is putting boxes on pages now to show mass and scope. We are not looking at the amenities that go in and create a true lifestyle center or other landmark developments. So none of that is represented on the page. But also, given your professional background, you understand, for us to be able to take those next steps and be able to invest the time, money, soft cost dollars it takes in professionals to be able to go to that level, we need some form of commitment that the UG is there and standing behind Lane 4 and want them to move forward on that. So that was how we came forward with working with economic development staff and the administrator's office of saying, can we put some boxes on paper, show the general concept and idea, and then give the very light marketing agreement we have here so we can begin to take the next step to develop a full-scale plan that this commission and community deserves.
Commissioner Walters, I wonder if there was a much stronger vision communicated by the unified government as to the final disposition of the property into a landmark project with specific standards and a much clearer vision, would that suffice?
Well, I think it would. I just don't see anything here that leads me to believe that we're aiming high enough. And I think we should give it every opportunity now that the economic environment and development environment is improving somewhat to make sure that we don't get locked in to a bunch of small developments that could be anywhere as opposed to a large contiguous urban site that you just don't find everywhere.
Yeah. And so I guess my question would be, there seem to be two things. First of all, that because of the location of the site and the historical nature of the site, and be really the affinity people have for this spot and what the investment the community has in this place, and at the same time the need to jumpstart the project and to engage someone perhaps other than our own staff in trying to carry the vision forward. If there were a stronger statement of vision incorporating those very things you articulated, would that then be the appropriate time to then engage with this agreement with Lane 4? Seems like I understand what you're saying. The way it's written now doesn't communicate the vision, doesn't secure that vision. But if we communicated that and said this is what we're looking for, that might give them much more clear marching orders to go out and effect the kind of development that we're looking for.
Because this agreement would not preclude that landmark development, but we haven't necessarily articulated our desire to have that landmark development maybe as strongly as we could or should, so that in fact we do shoot high enough to get something that truly is the highest asset that we can have in the community.
And importantly, as all understand here, we're not transferring ownership of this property to Lane 4 tomorrow. It is still the UG that owns it. It is still the UG that controls it, and the sort of inverted to some of our, previous developer UG relationships where we're the landowners and are coming and asking or something for incentives. Here it truly is Doug and George that are the one that are directing our whole engagement on this process and how we take it out to the market. So I think inherently you have those controls, but obviously that would not be anything we object to in a motion made by the commission, the full commission adding that on, or Doug being able to direct us in that as he further fleshes out this contract with us and moves it forward.
Commissioner Townsend.
Let me say that I agree with Commissioner Walters. We have great expectations that Indian Springs can be a vital center as it used to be. But I guess the problem we have is, what is that going to look like? And the way I interpreted this proposal is that, yes, the UG still owns it, we control it, but we are using Lane 4, who are developers, to go out and try to find people to fill that, entities to fill that, but we still say yes or no with anything that they come back with. One of the other safeguards I saw was that this is limited to a 2-year contract with 60-day notice by either party. That could be good or bad. But what happens in the intervening 2 years if we don't take this approach? I don't interpret this as a throwing in the towel. That would be the last thing I would want to see. But in the interim, I saw this as a means of getting an entity that is a developer, getting some traction for the possible. But we still say yes or no, or we'd like to see this. And, you know, that's why I was a bit taken aback by the assisted living facility. That's not what I envisioned, but, you know, at this point, anything's on the table, hopefully.
At the same time, it would seem, given all that, that the UG still has control over the final, disposition and the development. It would seem that perhaps it would assist Lane 4 if there was a clear vision articulated by the unified government as to the kind of development to limit the range of what you're pursuing.
Maybe just two quick additional comments. So, again, these plans don't address the acres located south of Orville, which really is the most highly visible part of this project area from the I-70-635 exchange. But in addition to that, we had done some previous work on existing retail, and within a 5-mile radius of this site, we have approximately 120,000 of our 150,000 plus residents, and we don't have a big box retailer within that 5-mile radius. And when you look around and do a comparison to our counterparts in the metropolitan area, that outside of maybe downtown Kansas City, Missouri, that kind of radius with lack of big box retail doesn't exist. And so that was one of the things we did convey, and obviously Lane 4 retail is right up their alley. That was one of our expectations for the site. However, we didn't want to just limit it to a retail-only type of concept because we didn't think that was the most successful use of the entire site.
And I would frankly add to that, partly just from a dollars and cents perspective, knowing the investment that the UG has made in this site, it may be a predisposition, but being involved in many of these projects, the way that you are going to find your way back to even is through big box retail. And having some of those big box retailers that are large generators that can produce significant dollars through the TIF is what can, one, help the UG offset some of their previous investment, but also, frankly, Commissioner, the quickest way towards a landmark development is being able to have that $50 or $60 million generating box that can allow a private developer and the UG as a whole to be able to afford the really, truly marvelous public-private partnership. I mean, i.e., you don't have to look any further than what's happened in western Wyandotte County to see the power of those large generating boxes and what they can create.
So procedurally tonight, this motion has failed for lack of votes. There are two possible outcomes from that. One is that there can be a motion to reconsider the vote, but that motion can only be made by someone who is effectively on the winning side, and in this case, it is the no vote. So if Commissioner Walters wants to make a motion to reconsider, that would be acceptable. Otherwise, I would invite Mr. Brackovich to work with members of Lane 4 if they chose to come back and maybe be a little bit more specific about the benefits of the arrangement in terms of the unified government. And I think, just a suggestion, it would be great if Mr. Brackovich and Commissioner Walters might talk a little bit so that Commissioner Walters could cast his vision, and maybe that would be incorporated into another visit and another presentation. There being no motion to reconsider, thank you, gentlemen, for coming tonight. Look forward to seeing you again if you choose to come back. Item number 5 on our agenda tonight is a request to authorize a resolution allowing the assignment of benefits by Speedway Heights LLC in conjunction with the Heights at Delaware Ridge project. Mr. Brakovich.
Thank you. I'm going to be joined by Kirk Peterson from Polsinelli. He's here representing the developer. To kind of get everyone familiar with what we're talking about here, this project is Delaware Heights. It's at about 130th and State Avenue. It's a 220